There are more than 1 billion cattle alive on Earth, kept for exactly one reason. In the US alone, roughly 9 billion chickens are killed annually. Sheep, goats, pigs, rabbits, and deer, massive worldwide industries exist around creatures that spend their entire lives munching grass, grain, and foliage. Now think back. When's the last time you spotted lion steak on a menu, or wolf, eagle, or shark? Aside from a fin soup you probably shouldn't touch anyway. Throughout history, people have raised, hunted, and consumed nearly every plant-eating animal on the planet. Predators, though, are a different story. Not on any real scale, not as a regular food source, not as habit. Cultures spread across every continent with zero contact between them, no common tongue, no shared belief system, all landed on the same unspoken principle. Consume the herbivores, spare the hunters. Stop and think about that for a second. It's genuinely odd. A cow and a wolf are both just meat made of the same muscle, fat, and protein, both technically edible. So why does one end up on nearly every table on Earth while the other almost never does? There isn't a single explanation. It's a combination of biology, chemistry, and culture, all reinforcing each other, all pointing toward the same conclusion. Start with the numbers, because the numbers nearly settle it on their own. Back in 1942, ecologist Raymond Lindeman described what later became known as the 10% rule. Every time energy moves up a food chain, about 90% of it vanishes, lost to body heat, motion, and digestion. Only around 10% makes it to the next level. Imagine a meadow generating 100 pounds worth of energy. That feeds roughly 10 pounds of deer. That 10 pounds of deer, in turn, supports about a single pound of wolf. Producing 1 pound of predator meat requires 10 pounds of prey beneath it. And that prey needed 100 pounds of vegetation underneath that. By design, predators are the costliest meat on Earth to raise. Farming lions for consumption would mean raising animals whose entire diet consists of other farmed animals. The numbers simply don't add up. For context, growing a single cow to slaughter weight already demands years of feed, water, and pasture most people never consider. Raising a predator big enough to eat would mean sacrificing 10 times that amount of prey just to keep one carnivore alive to maturity. No society in human history has ever had that kind of energy surplus to burn on one food item. It just isn't available to spend. But cost isn't even the worst part. Something builds up silently inside predator flesh that has nothing to do with expense and everything to do with toxicity. It's known as biomagnification. Environmental toxins, mercury, lead, industrial pollutants, don't vanish as they climb the food chain. They concentrate. A tiny fish picks up a trace of mercury from its surroundings. A larger fish devours hundreds of those small fish, absorbing all that mercury at once. A shark then eats hundreds of those larger fish, absorbing even more. By the time you reach the top predator, you're looking at an animal that has spent its whole existence quietly stockpiling everyone else's contamination. This is precisely why physicians warn expectant mothers away from shark, swordfish, and king mackerel. Not because these fish are inherently unhealthy, but because they occupy the summit of a chain that's been silently gathering toxins for years. The identical pattern nearly eliminated bald eagles during the 20th century. DDT pesticide drained into waterways, was absorbed by algae, concentrated within fish, then concentrated further inside the eagles feeding on those fish. By the 1960s, DDT concentrations in American apex predators had climbed high enough to thin eggshells until they collapsed under the weight of the mother bird herself. Bald eagle numbers in the lower United States fell below 1,000 breeding pairs before DDT was banned in 1972. That's what decades at the top of a food chain does to living tissue. Whether the toxin is mercury, lead, or a chemical humans sprayed years earlier without realizing its eventual destination. This danger isn't a recent discovery either. Arctic explorers found out the hard way. For generations, sled dogs across polar regions have instinctively avoided polar bear liver. Human expedition crews in the early 1900s hadn't gotten that message. Members of Douglas Mawson's 1911 Antarctic expedition consumed husky liver out of desperation and suffered brutal headaches, skin peeling, and eventual organ failure. Doctors later identified the cause as hypervitaminosis A, severe vitamin A poisoning. Polar bear and husky liver contain such extreme concentrations of vitamin A that a single portion can kill a person. Arctic indigenous communities had understood this danger for centuries before science ever gave it a name. Then there's what predator flesh actually undergoes inside the living animal, long before reaching anyone's plate. Prey species mostly graze peacefully. Predators chase, ambush and battle for every meal. That constant physical strain floods their muscles with adrenaline and cortisol while depleting the glycogen that keeps meat tender when an animal is relaxed at the time of death. What results is meat that's chewier, gamier, and often carries a heavy, musky taste from testosterone-linked compounds embedded deep within the tissue. People who've actually sampled mountain lion or wolf consistently describe it the same way: survivable in a genuine emergency, but never something you'd pick voluntarily. Then there's the disease factor. Predators feed on the sick, elderly, and weakest animals in a population, meaning they also ingest whatever parasites and pathogens those creatures carried. Trichinosis, a serious parasitic illness once common in undercooked bear and wild boar, spreads specifically through predator and scavenger meat. Wildlife researchers have consistently noted that carnivore meat carries a far higher parasite burden than herbivore meat for this exact reason. A predator doesn't just consume flesh. It consumes everything already wrong with its prey. The rule isn't entirely without exception, though history's exceptions actually reinforce it rather than contradict it. Bear meat has been consumed across parts of Scandinavia, Russia, and North America for generations, but typically in small portions and almost always cooked thoroughly enough to be essentially sterile. Lion meat has surfaced occasionally in parts of Africa during severe famines, when desperate communities truly had no other choice remaining. In virtually every recorded instance throughout history, people only resorted to predator meat after every safer, more affordable plant-based option had been exhausted. That's not a contradiction. It's the rule proving itself. Predator meat has consistently been the last resort, never the preferred option. Even now, the exception stays rare and heavily debated. South Africa maintains a legal lion farming operation, but it exists almost entirely to supply lion bones to traditional medicine markets across Asia, not to serve lion meat at dinner tables. Conservation organizations have criticized the practice for years, and it remains among the only serious efforts anywhere to farm a predator commercially. That it's controversial, limited in scale, and focused on bones rather than meat only underscores how thoroughly the rest of the world has avoided this path. Eventually, culture caught up with biology and made the rule official. Leviticus explicitly bans consuming birds of prey and clawed carnivores, specifically naming eagles, vultures, and hawks. Islamic dietary law draws an identical boundary, forbidding animals that hunt using fangs or talons. Across civilizations with absolutely no contact with one another, from ancient Israel to the Arabian Peninsula to indigenous hunting cultures throughout North America, the same invisible line kept reappearing entirely independently. Eat the grazer, leave the hunter alone. Some anthropologists suggest this was never purely about safety. Predators were also feared and, in countless cultures, revered. And you don't eat the creature you've built a religion around. You don't consume the animal whose skull decorates your chief's headdress or whose image protects your temple gates. Across dozens of unconnected civilizations, lions, eagles, wolves, and bears repeatedly appeared as symbols of power, royalty, and divinity. It's difficult to turn a god into a meal. So the true answer was never one single factor. It's biology layered on chemistry, layered on culture, all converging on the same point. Predator meat demands too much energy to produce. It accumulates too much toxin. It tastes worse, degrades worse, and carries significantly more disease. And beyond all that, we spent thousands of years quietly transforming apex predators into symbols rather than food. Every ecosystem on the planet operates on this same silent math. Energy moves upward, and less of it survives each step of the climb. Humans never invented this rule about predators being off the menu. We simply kept noticing it, again and again in every part of the world, and built our diets around it. The wolf was never destined for the dinner table. The math determined that long, long ago.